my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are not currently portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV, or social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating unrealistic expectations of something that don't even exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guest, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, something completely different. We have Mita Kilic, and we are going to talk about communication and the voice. What is language for? So hi, Mita. How are you?
Hello, Sophie. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
I'm a music therapist. I play the harp. I've been working with people using music as a means of communication for over 20 years, and I love what I do.
Okay. So tell us, how does the voice affect communication?
I think if we start from the beginning, and if we look at what language is for and how it evolved, I think that might make sense.
Okay, that's fine.
So if any of you have had babies or have seen babies, babies think they're communicating. They can look at you and they can wave their hands around and they can make sounds at you. They think they're talking, but they are communicating. So they're communicating pre-verbally. And what they're communicating with is tonally inflected. They're making cooing sounds. They're making mouth movements, and they're trying.
A bit like an animal, really.
Absolutely. And if you think in the history, the pre-human evolution of language, animals communicate through inflected sound. A sound might mean that somebody's sexually interested in you. A sound might mean somebody's feeling threatened and about to attack you. But it doesn't say, I think you're sexy. It says,
Yeah.
So the inflection in sound creates the meaning. And that tonal inflection comes before words ever evolved. So in the baby will show pleasure and distress, and in increasingly complicated ways communicate before it starts saying mum, or indeed no.
Yeah.
So babies will be communicating, children, babies, little people will be communicating largely through the tone of their voice. And that's how language develops. It develops because we need to communicate. Why do we need to communicate? Because we want to relate. The baby wants to relate with its caregivers. It wants the caregiver's attention. And sometimes it just wants to talk to itself, and it might be and exploring sounds and playing to itself.
So can I just jump back completely here for a minute? Because the tonal inflection, as you say, is something that I find really interesting in general, because being French, it's quite flat, and then you go down if it's a sentence and a statement, or you go up if it's a question and off. Where English is much more musical, you go up and down all the time. And that's, for instance, one of the things my mum always says. She finds it hard to speak English because she can't do that, and she can't understand it either. So how does that relate with what you've just said?
I think that language is culturally embedded. So from very early on, you'll be able to see a Chinese accent in a Chinese baby and a French accent in a French baby. And also, if you think about it, how we use language, how we construct language. In France, I think you speak a lot more in the present tense, where we will tend to use the past tense. So how we actually structure our language, and therefore how we think about life, is quite culturally embedded. And there are serious differences, and that's what makes life rich and varied. And I think it's important. But what goes across cultures, what goes across even species, is that you can understand if somebody's angry. You can understand if somebody's feeling a bit silly.
Yeah.
And those moods are transmitted by the inflection.
Yeah.
And I think if there's a takeaway for me, for everyone, if you want an outcome, think about your tone of voice. Because if you wish to persuade someone, or you wish to include someone, coming over with a hard, you must do this now, voice will make them push back against you. Whereas, hey, come on, let's do this now, is more inviting. So if you consider the tone of voice, it's a bit like if you can avoid having a knee-jerk reaction in any relationship. If you can consider what you want, then you can use the tone of voice that's most likely to get that outcome, rather than just having an emotional dump on someone and a shout. On the other hand, maybe actually your toddler's right near the edge of the road and you are frightened and you're just going to scream because you want to frighten them into stillness.
Yeah.
And that's not wrong. That's really appropriate.
It's again going back to outcome, isn't it?
Exactly. So how you use your voice, how you inflect, has a lot to do with the outcome and more than actually the words you use. And I think it's having that awareness that,
isn't it?
Exactly. So language is the result of how we emotionally are motivated to communicate. And that's a very basic need. We all need to communicate, to relate. And how we do that is an emotional need. And therefore, the quality of that relationship that we are seeking is expressed in the tone of our voices.
So do you, because someone I'm thinking of is very, very auditory, and he can really hear various nuances in people's voices and stuff.
Yes.
I'm thinking of music here, so more singers maybe, but he can do that even if people are talking, where I really can't, to be completely honest with you.
Well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. Maybe you can, and it's not as conscious. I would say that if someone was laughing, you probably laugh along with them. And I would say that if someone was screaming, you might run and help them.
But I'm talking about more of the nuances of emotions that are in someone's voice.
And what I'm saying is, how can you test that out? Because I will be responding pre-conscious and consciously to the tones of your voice. And it's not just your voice, it's your body language and your eye contact and a whole range of things that's about the communication, but it's the emotion that I'm going to respond to as much as anything else. And a big way, you're encouraging me.
Yeah.
You're not interrupting me. You're just encouraging me with your voice.
Bonding, rapport.
Exactly. And how much rapport we can build with people, whether they're someone close to us or a stranger, makes a huge difference in how we negotiate that relationship. And obviously, we all want to have as successful relationships, mutually successful relationships as we can.
So, talking of that, what about, to a degree, not necessarily deaf people as in they can't hear a thing, but how does that relate, so to speak? Because obviously they really struggle over time to speak and to have the right tonalities, but some people are also partially deaf.
So I was deaf as a small child. I was a lip reader. And I think it can very much impact your abilities to relate. Probably one of the reasons I'm a music therapist now is that I was completely deaf as a small child. And so it's given me an additional interest, if you like, in relationships and sound. We tend to think that life is very visual. Actually, our hearing is the last sense to go when you fall asleep. You can close your eyes, you can't close your ears.
No.
So your hearing is the last sense to go. And when I work with people who are in hospital and quite seriously ill, I will still make music for them, because any tiny level of consciousness comes up, the hearing will be there.
Mm.
So your hearing is the first sense to return. If you wake up, it'll be your hearing that will wake you first, or you'll hear first. If people come out of a coma, it'll be their hearing that will come first. So hearing has a profound effect on how we relate, and a lot of media is geared towards the visual. There's a lot of how you should look. But particularly as women, we have a lot of things put at us that we have to look this shape, or wear those clothes, or have this particular makeup. So we are taught to think a lot about our physical appearance, but actually how we sound and how we smell makes a big difference.
Fair point. Fair point.
And I think that how we sound and the quality of that presentation is as important as the visual.
And something that I find quite interesting is how, you get to say, and I'm thinking of a dating sense here at the moment, because at the time of recording this, we are in lockdown. Mm-hmm. And some people on dating sites may start speaking on the phone or whatever. And from someone's voice and the pitch, the different sort of pace, the volume, how they are, you kind of start to imagine what they look like. Absolutely. And there are certain people that think that the voice actually doesn't match the person, because we've created someone completely different in their head.
I can see that could be an issue. Sometimes people sound younger. Our voices may not age as much as perhaps our skin does. Mm-hmm. And yes, I think an attractive voice, people might imagine an attractive person. But again, it's very personal. What is attractive to me or what is attractive to you could be different. But yes, when you're on the phone with someone, the pace, I think also the pace of a conversation. If I'm stressed, I will talk more. So there won't just be more talking, it probably will be a little bit faster. The pitch might go up a little bit, and I'll show that I'm anxious because I just keep on talking and talking and talking and talking. Don't even take a breath. Now, that's not sexy. If you're talking about yourself all the time and you're anxious, you're not leaving space to respond to someone else, and you're not leaving space for someone else to respond to you. So I think not just the tone, the inflection, but also the pace. If you're going to talk to someone for the first time, have a plan that you're going to just talk a little bit and listen a little bit, and talk a little bit and listen a little bit. And obviously, if someone doesn't talk back to you, maybe they're not someone you're connecting with well on the phone, but having an opportunity, you're leaving space for me to speak, so I'm talking.
And this is the thing, funny enough, I had an old boss who used to use the technique of what he called the pregnant pause, where he would let people speak and speak, because people don't normally like silence in the middle of a conversation. So they would fill the silence with whatever. And he used to love doing that to see what they were going to come up with, or come out with, even so. And see whether they were going to start to contradict themselves or whatever. But he used to really play that game quite a lot.
And I wouldn't advocate playing games, but I would certainly advocate listening and having a rhythm in the conversation. So thinking about your tone of voice and thinking about the pace of your speech and the rhythm of the exchange.
And I think that the thing with that is, as you say, it's not about playing games. It's a lot of the time people are very quick to talk and say loads, but they're not so quick to listen, are they?
Exactly. And when you're in a new situation with a stranger, for whatever reason, you have opportunities to build mutuality. So talking and listening, really important.
And can the voice change Well, actually, no, I'm asking about, I know the answer to that. It can, because obviously our voice changed from when we're little to now, sort of thing, when we're adults. How does that work, so to speak?
Okay, so our voices do change, and they change with our body mass. Your voice is your personal musical instrument, and your body is the resonating chamber.
Mm-hmm.
So when your body changes shape, your voice changes. Typically, our voices get lower as we get older. Men's voices get significantly lower. And there's some quite interesting thoughts I have on why we have a patriarchal society. I think that lower voices are associated with maturity,
Mm-hmm.
and people trust a lower voice, which means that a male voice may automatically have more authority than a female voice. And certainly, if I want to be taken seriously, I'm going to speak in a strong, womanly voice. I'm not going to speak in a silly little girly voice, because people will laugh.
Yeah.
So I think that lower voices tend to be perceived as more mature and therefore taken more seriously. And that is possibly a reason why we see a lot of male leaders, because they have deeper voices, and whether they deserve the authority or not, unconsciously we recognize an older person, a stronger voice, feel the security, and are more likely to be obedient to them or responsive to them.
And why can't we hear the sound of our own voice properly? Someone said to me once that it had to do with a skull and how that vibrates.
Well, I suppose that depends what you mean properly.
What I mean by that is, as I'm talking right now, I can hear who I, know who I am, sort of thing. If I hear that voice anywhere, I know it's mine. But if I,
Yes.
for instance, listen to my voice once we finish recording this and I edit it, I'm obviously now more used to it because I do that quite a bit, but it's not what I hear. I hear someone else speak.
And absolutely, you've got, how you're hearing and how you're speaking are two different things. I'm afraid I've got so used to hearing myself that it doesn't seem different to me. Mm-hmm. But I think naturally, where we wouldn't listen to recordings of ourselves, so probably a human in the wild, it wouldn't be an issue for.
But a lot of people don't like their own voice when they listen to it recorded.
I think that's true. And I think also a lot of people don't like their own photographs. A lot of people, there is very good people angle for the right shot for the selfie. I think we tend to judge ourselves quite harshly. And I think that's a bigger issue about worthiness and being comfortable in your own skin. My voice is good enough. My body is good enough.
About being good enough. I mean, I think for me, it's just that it doesn't sound like me when I hear it.
Well, that's all right. That's because, as you said, the what you hear is not the same as what I hear. And so you're not used to it. I think as long as people are happy with how they sound, whether they're listening to themselves on a recording or talking and listening to themselves as they talk, that's okay. Mm-hmm. And it's natural. It's like the way you look at yourself. I'll never see me the way you see me. I can only ever see myself in a mirror, which is upside flipped. I'll never be able to see myself the way other people do. Just not possible.
So you were saying earlier about how when we start out as a child or a baby, it's more about the noises, shall we say, and how we pick up an accent from that. Tell us a bit more about that, about accents.
Okay, so babies will probably come out screaming. The first thing they do is take an in-breath, and the second thing they'll do is probably make a sound. Some babies will make little cooing noises, some of them will scream out. But babies are not born into silence unless they're born deaf. Babies are born into a noisy world full of humans talking, and those humans talking will include probably predominantly people talking from their culture. Mm-hmm. So their parents, the nurses, the health visitors, the siblings will all be speaking in the language of their their culture, or at least the culture that they're going to assimilate into as they grow. Mm-hmm. So as they learn to get more control over the sounds they make, they will try and imitate the sounds that their parents make, and they will seek that connection. They'll seek that communication by responding to the parents, and the parents may make sounds or indeed say words, and the baby will try and imitate the parents. So the way a child develops speech is through listening and absorbing the sounds that the caregivers and the family members are making around it. So it will develop in Hampshire, it'll develop English. And in France, it'll develop French, and in China, one of the various languages they use there, and so on. So the babies will be imitating and listening and absorbing and trying to copy from right at the start. They maybe 3-4 months old, they'll really start to be quite aware of what's going on around them and forming those sounds with the intention to communicate with the person that speaks their language, or at least speaks the language that's going on around them.
So sometimes when you meet somebody, you just don't like them. There's no reason for it. It's just something, it's animal, it's instincts, whatever, you just don't like them. But it's the same with certain voices and certain musics. Is there a particular reason for that?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think that a lot of times we have associations. So I know that if I hear a voice that's similar to a voice or an accent of a person I've had a relationship with before, I'm going to probably bring those expectations from that previous relationship to the person with the new voice. Perhaps better said, I'll bring the expectations that I had from that person to this new person, even though they're not the same at all.
Yeah.
So I think we do that with visual things as well. I think we transfer expectations because somebody sounds the way my granny used to sound. I'm going to be more likely to trust and like them. They don't have an earning of that trust. It's just coming almost unconsciously to me. I'm feeling warm towards them. And then I'm thinking, oh, the reason I'm feeling warm towards you is because you sound like granny.
Yeah.
And that's a thing. And then maybe if I'm a little bit savvy, I might just double check. Am I feeling incredibly warm towards you? And do you really deserve it? Is this safe for me to be quite so pleased to see you? So I think, yes, we are we build associations and memories and almost stereotypes that help us get through life. We know if we say the word chair, we know the chairness of chair. That could be an awful lot of different chairs, but you say chair and people get chair. And I think we can also stereotype on people. There's some very negative racial stereotypes that happen. And accent and language and tone of voice can all be part of those stereotypes that partially help us to get through life and partially block us from making different choices and going to different places. I think there's a balance between the associations with a voice that help you sort out adults and children, male and female, people from France, people from England. Those stereotypes help, and then the stereotypes that go a little bit too far, which says that all men are brutes, and I can hear that's a man voice, so he must be bad. That's probably not a helpful stereotype.
No. And what about musics? Why do you really like some and not others?
I think there's lots of reasons for that. We all have our own resonant tone.
Okay.
I have the pitch of my voice that it's comfortable for me to speak in. And probably I'm going to like music that actually in pitch aligns with the tones that I vibrate with.
Okay, I didn't know that.
There's been a very little bit of research on that when you have a playlist of music that you like, very often it will have similar pitches, and those pitches will relate to notes that your body vibrates with.
Okay.
Not a good lot of research on it, but in my opinion, there's enough of that to say that's a possibility. I think also we like what we're familiar with. So if you grew up in a certain culture and you're used to listening to a certain music, that'll probably always bring back good memories and you'll want to listen to more of it. So I think there's a cultural element and there's probably a physiological element to your preferences. And I would also say that probably as we get older, the sorts of music that we like may change. I think little children probably enjoy quite simple things. Nursery rhymes are a cross-culture thing. Children like simple songs to dance to or to do actions to. And I think as we get older, maybe we do enjoy more complicated things, the way we like more complicated flavors of food, and maybe we enjoy more complicated stories. So I think as we get older, perhaps more complicated things are appealing. I've also noticed that teenagers really like it loud on the bass.
That is very true.
For me, and I actually think that for a teenager, life can be quite unstable.
Mm-hmm.
You're not an adult, but your body's telling you you're not a child anymore. And I think there's actually something quite grounding with the loud bass that actually helps teenagers feel settled.
Mm-hmm. And
I would never expect to have the bass turned up that loud in a care home. I don't think it would be healthy for people in their 90s to have that much bass. But I think teenagers and young people, a lot of bass seems to help them to feel connected socially to each other and connected to the music, and possibly actually connected to their bodies too. Different music for different stages.
This is something that I always find quite interesting. My dad used to love classical music. Some of it that he used to like, I didn't mind, but some of it I really do not like. I couldn't tell you why. I can't tell you what instrument it is because it sounds stupid. But at its funeral, my mum had a violinist, sorry, I can't say the word, someone playing a violin for the blessing of the coffin or whatever. And I actually thought she'd not played because I didn't hear it. I heard the organ, I heard the harp, I heard all of that, but I didn't hear the violin, I didn't hear other instruments. And my dad could recognise instruments in a piece of music, and I really can't. They all sound the same to me, give or take. You know, apart from obviously a harp sounds like a harp. You know, there's no denying that. But others, I just can't hear them.
I think there are lots of different reasons why people like different things, and obviously you're going to enjoy things that you can hear well. So wherever your hearing is good, wherever it connects for you, that's the thing that's going to give you pleasure. The violin is a very different sound to the organ. It's a single line, whereas the organ will be built up with lots of chords, so you'll get a lot more resonance. So there is a lot more vibrational energy in an organ. If you think about an organ, it's a great big whacking lot of pipes.
Yeah.
Whereas with the violin, it's just a small little box. It can make a lot of noise, but it's just a little box, so there will not be the depth of resonance in a violin that you can get out of an organ. So people will hear more of the organ.
Well, I find the resonance thing quite fascinating because, yes, it does explain an awful lot, doesn't it?
Okay, so resonance, how we speak and how our body resonates and how we produce sound is very visceral. It's very animal, and how that sound is produced. In some ways, it's also very intimate. Your voice is your personal musical instrument. The sound comes from within us. And in music therapy, sometimes that's almost too close, too personal. And we give people tambourines and drums and shakers and other instruments to play so that they can communicate through sound with us and with each other without the level of intimacy that voice brings. And I think it's understanding how personal my voice is, how personal your voice is, and what a gift it is to give someone that expression and to use it wisely, to use it intentionally and with as much thought for how it's being received as you can manage.
And meaning, I suppose.
Absolutely. And that doesn't mean that I want us not to be spontaneous. I think banter and humor and quick fire verbal responses are all really important and playful and only enjoyable if they are spontaneous. but to be generally aware that you are giving a gift from within your body when you speak, and to know that it matters because also how you speak reflects how you feel, and how you feel actually controls the outcomes of your life. If you feel good and you sound out into the world with a good vibration, you're going to get good coming back to you. And at this particular moment, I actually believe we need to be sending out as many good vibes as we can.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Minita, thank you so much for your time. It's fascinating to listen to you. Is there anything that you would like to impart lastly to everybody?
When we think about the tone of voice and how it affects us, be mindful of what you listen to on the television. Be mindful of how that's affecting not just you, but those you love and care for. Consider what you're listening to, and listen to things that are uplifting in mood. Listen to things that will, the tone of the presenter or the tone of the actor's voice, will that make you and those you love feel good listening to that? Ask the question.
Very good. Thank you so much. Well, that is all what we've got time for today. So thanks again. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.